I've been teaching and working in one capacity or other as a teacher or coach since I was probably a freshman in college. Been doing this a long time. I knew I needed to get permanent certification as a high school teacher, and so I had to get a master's degree and didn't know what I was going to do. So I took a career counseling course at a public library, and I did some assessments, and everything kept showing up at teaching at the college level, and the topic was history. If you want to go to grad school and you have a talent, for example, coaching, get into the school and they give you a graduate assistantship where you work as an assistant coach and they provide funding for you to go to grad school. I was offered a graduate assistantship at Dartmouth College, and at that time I had just made the U.S. national team in 1989, and I knew if I went up to Dartmouth that I wouldn't be able to play club, which I needed to play to keep my skills sharp. Gettysburg came in and offered, they created a position, and the guy that was the athletic director at the time was a guy named Chuck Winters, and I had played against Chuck. He was the head lacrosse coach at Cortland State when I was in college, so he knew me in the lacrosse community, and that network created this graduate assistantship where I went down in exchange for coaching soccer, coaching lacrosse, and I worked on another department on campus. They provided the funding for me to get my master's degree at Shippensburg University, and I coached. It was a great time from 89 to 92.
Welcome to the Fred Opie Show, where you learn how to make a difference on and off the field. I'm your host, Fred Opie, a former Syracuse University and U.S. national team athlete turned historian. I use the oral histories of my guests to unpack strategies to make a positive impact in this world. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If you like what you hear on the show, share a link on Facebook or Twitter, or send a link to a friend. If you have a question you want us to address on the show, write me at fdopie@gmail.com. You can find our show archive, blog, suggested reading, and more at fredopie.com. So today we're going to do something different. We are switching the script. One of my former players, Archie Perry, who I started coaching when he was in third grade as part of the Wellesley Youth Lacrosse Program here in Wellesley, Massachusetts, which is where Babson College is located. Archie came in to interview me as part of a school assignment. He is a sophomore at the Belmont Hill School in Massachusetts. I thought it went so well that I decided to make it a podcast. Shout out to Steve Carr, who we've had on the show. He's director of admissions at the Belmont Hill School and a lacrosse coach. If you've been listening to the show long enough, you know parts of my own story. How I thought as a younger version of me, as I say in my new book, Start With the Gift. I write that book as a lacrosse memoir, so much of what you hear me say in this interview, I go deeper and unpack more in the book. If you got a young person in your house between sixth grade and up, get the book for them. And for kids who, like me, had lacrosse on the brain, parents, don't be stupid. Not the best way to choose a school. Not that long ago, listened to somebody call into the Dave Ramsey show, explain why their child was transferring from one school to another and how to get out of the apartment lease they signed. And it came down to they weren't getting the playing time they thought they would at this college. They were going to transfer to another college where they would get more playing time. Folks, it's about school and it's not about sports. Don't be as dumb as I was. So that's part of what you'll hear here. You'll learn more about the mentions in my life, becoming a college professor, why I decided to do the podcast, how the podcast evolved, why we focus on what we focus on in this podcast. Archie, by the way, great job. I'm very proud of you and what you've been doing. Shout out to Mr. and Mrs. Perry. Great job raising Archie. Today on the Fred Opie Show, an interview with host Fred Opie, now in the guest seat.
Growing up in New York, what were your greatest passions? And did you always want to pursue college lacrosse, or was that a way to a great education at Syracuse?
First of all, school was never easy for me. I had not ADHD, but ADHD on steroids. I was one of those kids that was in special education classes, one of those kids whose academic self-esteem was at an all-time low. Really did not feel confident at all. And the area where I gained confidence and had confidence was athletics. As a sophomore, I loved three sports: So I don't know which one I loved more, but I was a soccer player, a goaltender. I was a hockey player, and I was a lacrosse player. And I loved all three sports. I was a fanatic. You know, being here in Boston, I fell in love with Bobby Orr, found him really early in my age, and that's who I wanted to be. I think by my sophomore year, there was a kid from my hometown, a guy named Clay Johnson. He was one of the early All-Americans from my high school, if not the first. And Clay was good enough to get recruited to go to the University of Maryland. And I went and saw him as a freshman. He ran second midfield in the national championship against Johns Hopkins. It was at Byrd Stadium in College Park, Maryland. And I remember walking into the tunnel to the game when they were warming up, in the crowd. I mean, it's a huge rivalry, even if it's not a national championship, but it's a national championship, so it's even crazier. And that atmosphere inspired me right then not to think about going to college, but to think about playing college sports. So I tell people that's about how deep I was, as I was fixated on, I wanted the sports opportunity in college, and that's what I ended up pursuing. Fortunately, it got me through school. In order to play, you had to be eligible, so school was hard. But the motivation was so high to play at that level and to play in a national championship, win a national championship. It gave me the ability to get over all the obstacles where, if you think about it, I really shouldn't have been able to make it into college and to do well, but I was motivated. So my grades were so bad in high school, not because I didn't care, it was just hard, that I had to go to a community college. I went to Herkimer County Community College, and I played lacrosse there, and it made me eligible to then eventually earn a scholarship. I got a scholarship to play at Maryland, not a very big one, and I got a scholarship to go to Syracuse, got a scholarship offer to go to Adelphi University in Long Island, and I ended up going to Syracuse.
And can you talk about your time at Syracuse playing lacrosse?
Syracuse had won their first national championship in 1983. There was a player on that team, a guy named Tim Nelson, who's now in the Lacrosse Hall of Fame. Tim was from the same section I was from. Matter of fact, our towns were bordered. They bordered on each other. The hockey goalie on my travel team in hockey was from Yorktown. He played at lacrosse at Yorktown High School, and I got to know the Yorktown lacrosse community and started hanging out with these guys. So I got to know Tim. I actually would cover Tim during games. He started off playing lacrosse as a scholarship athlete at NC State. They used to have lacrosse. It used to be really good. So Tim went down there his freshman year. His brother was a senior when he was a sophomore. They dropped their program after his freshman year in college. So he transferred to Syracuse. And we ran into each other when I was up at Syracuse. And he said, so what are you going to be doing after your last year at Herkimer? I said, I want to transfer to Maryland. He said, well, you really should apply here. We have 3 starting defensemen. They're all seniors. And it'd be a great opportunity for you. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah. Syracuse went from nowhere to beating Maryland to being ranked number 2 in the country and then going and upsetting Johns Hopkins in their first national championship, 83. So I quickly began to think about Syracuse much more so than Maryland, and Maryland wasn't showing me a whole lot of attention in terms of recruiting. Tim went and spoke to the head coaches, told them to look out for me, and they did. So I got into Syracuse, transferred there in the fall of 83, had knee surgery right before I got to school, so I didn't come in the best of shape and ability, and struggled. I don't think so much academically. My grade point average when I graduated from Syracuse was about a 2.3, which is barely of a C. But this was a lot of effort, and I didn't have any of the support I have as a college professor in an institution who understands that their staff needs support. So I did rather well despite that. I struggled for the first year lacrosse-wise because I was not, it was a big jump from a junior college to Division I, and I had a lot of bad habits that I had to get rid of. I had to get in much better shape. I went from 178 playing weight to thinking you needed to be big to play Division I to 210 pounds. Mostly of it was fat, wasn't muscle. And then I was coming off a knee surgery. I was not playing very well, wasn't playing a lot. And I went into a deep depression that lasted probably almost a year. Academically, I wasn't making dean's list, but I didn't have any problems. Lacrosse was so much a part of my life. Not playing and not doing well was very tough.
Who are your greatest mentors growing up?
Greatest mentors, a guy named Steve Mavis, a lacrosse player at the time who moved to the street I lived on Baton Road in Croton-on-the-Hudson, and Steve moved maybe 100 yards from my house, and he was a sophomore, I believe, lacrosse player at Kutztown State in Pennsylvania. He moved to that street. We had a mutual love for the game of lacrosse, and he began to mentor me a great deal, showed me everything I kind of knew and developed as a lacrosse player. He's a real important mentor. The other one would definitely be my father, who just had a tremendous work ethic. My father had no more than 1 year of community college as far as an education, but was extremely disciplined. He worked as a Sing Sing prison guard, maximum security prison guard, and then ran his own business. We would clean offices, fire departments, doctor's office on the weekend. And so my dad had these two lives of his own, and he loved sports.
Do you have any memories of that shaped you of who you are today?
The key to understanding the success I've had this far in my life is discipline. I'm the youngest of three boys. Spent a lot of time working with my dad after my brothers went off to school. And I worked one-on-one with my dad, spent a lot of time one-on-one with my dad. And he would just drop these nuggets of wisdom on me about how to handle your money, about what the definition of what a man is, integrity. Just a lot of things that became a part of who I am now, without a doubt. My dad also was one of these people back in the day they would call him a race man, and that meant somebody who knew and loved their culture and their history as an African American. When I was in grad school, I could have conversation with him about people like W.B. Du Bois, Paul Robeson. He could have that conversation with you as though you were talking to a professor. He was very well read. I'm named after Frederick Douglass. My parents, both of them, were very knowledgeable of their culture and very proud of being African American during a time where not everybody was so proud of it.
In one of your podcasts, you called yourself a tweener. Can you describe what that is?
Yeah, I love that term. Tweener is somebody who, despite an obvious limitation, it might be speed, it might be size, it might be strength. Despite that limitation, they excel. The strength coach at Syracuse at that time was a guy named Mike Wysick. Mike is the strength coach today for the Dallas Cowboys. He was a strength coach for New England Patriots. He's got like 5 or 6 Super Bowl rings. And Mike was at Syracuse, and he used to look at my legs. He'd say, "Man, your upper body should sue your lower body for a lack of support." So I'm not a physical specimen. And despite that lack of invitation, I thrived. And I think there are a lot of people. I watched a special the other day on Wes Walker. As a high school senior, he was the Oklahoma Player of the Year in football. Yet he had no Division I offers. Despite, Oklahoma's football country. Nobody offered him because he's small. He's a small guy. His coach wrote these letters to all these coaches. Finally, the only person that responded was one of his former players who was a college coach at Texas Tech. With fear and trembling, he offered Wes Walker a scholarship, and he thought his boss was going to kill him. And Wes turned out really well. Had a great year at Texas Tech during his time there, and then draft came. Nobody drafted him, despite this. So I look at people like that, and I see myself very much like that. The last thing they expected is for me to be playing in 2 national championships and then going on, have the opportunity to play in the U.S. national team. Nobody expected that to happen.
The show will be right back. For related content on negotiating the world of school and sports, visit our website at fredopie.com. Check out our podcast archive and review the show on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and iTunes. The best way to support the podcast is to tell a friend, share the show on Facebook and Twitter, or send them to our website at fredopie.com. Start with your gift. Understand and monetize it while serving others with it. This book is written for the younger version of me. In Start With Your Gift, I help you recognize your gift, select mentors, choose the right school and training, consider childhood wounds in need of healing, identify internships, show you how to select jobs, get your financial house in order, Live and give like no one else.
And it's available on Amazon.com as an ebook or paperback.
We have a special offer for those of you who buy the book this month. My Super 7 Guide to Time Management, Public Speaking, and Writing, 7 Habits of Highly Effective Student Athletes. I have the Power Principles for Thriving in School. What Does It Take to Be a Champion? A 2-part series. These are messages that are exclusive offers for those who buy the book this month. Email us proof of purchase of the book. You can send me a photo of your receipt, or you can cut and paste the receipt into an email, and we will send you an MP3 version of these exclusive messages for free. Download them onto your smartphone and make them part of your automobile, gym, or running university library. You can't beat this offer with a baseball bat. I welcome the opportunity to come and discuss the book with your team, school, and/or organization.
Now back to the show.
Did you enter the profession of teaching after grad school?
As an undergrad, I'm a physical education major. My first job out of Syracuse as an undergrad is I'm teaching physical education in Danbury, Connecticut. And I did that for 2 years. And then I knew I wanted ultimately to be a teacher at the high school level and a coach. So I went and I coached at Hempstead High School in Long Island. I did that for a year. So I've been teaching and working in one capacity or other as a teacher or coach since I was probably a freshman in college. Been doing this a long time. And then ultimately, I knew I needed to get permanent certification as a high school teacher. And so I had to get a master's degree and didn't know what I was going to do. So I took a career counseling course at a public library, and I did some assessments, and everything kept showing up at teaching at the college level, and the topic was history. So that's why I ended up going back to school, getting my master's degree, and I used the lacrosse tribe to do it. So I contacted a friend, Hank Janzyck, who's a guy I interviewed on my podcast, and I told him I wanted to do this. And he began to use his network to get some offers. The first offer I had to get a graduate assistant position, which again, for those that are listening, if you want to go to grad school and you have a talent, for example, coaching, get into the school and they give you a graduate assistantship where you work as an assistant coach and they provide funding for you to go to grad school. I was offered a graduate assistantship at Dartmouth College. And at that time, I had just made the U.S. national team in 1989, and I knew if I went up to Dartmouth that I wouldn't be able to play club, which I needed to play to keep my skills sharp. So Gettysburg came in and offered, they created a position, and the guy that was the athletic director at the time was a guy named Chuck Winters. And I had played against Chuck. He was the head lacrosse coach at Cortland State when I was in college, so he knew me right away. And again, the lacrosse community and that network created this graduate assistantship where I went down in exchange for coaching soccer, coaching lacrosse, and I worked on another department on campus. They provided the funding for me to get my master's degree at Shippensburg University, and I coached. It was a great time from 89 to 92. So I've been involved for a very long time and knew ultimately I wanted to get a PhD and teach as a college professor.
What courses do you teach here at Babson?
Food history courses. Foodways is just a term used to explain why we eat, what we eat, and how that has changed over a period of time.
So what led you to teaching that?
As a undergrad, I wanted to get playing time, and when my playing time wasn't coming, I, as a phys ed major, I listened and read anything I could. I remember reading some nutrition articles about sports nutrition and what it said about your diet and how that affects your performance. So I often will ask people, are you eating to win or winning to eat? And so I made a decision as an undergrad that I would eat to win. And so I started changing my diet and started studying that. And I quickly realized that among my family members as African Americans, people started looking at me like I was really strange. I got to the point where probably 2 to 3 years out of undergrad, I still to this day, I don't think I've had a soda, I don't know how long. It may be 20 or more years. No interest whatsoever. But I stopped drinking soda, eating junk food. And then by 3 years out, I found that eating as a vegan was much better for me. So I was a vegetarian and then a vegan for maybe 15, 20 years, and then changed back as opportunities came up to possibly be a host of a food show. That's when I changed back so I would just have more options. My interest in food as an athlete ultimately led to my interest in the history of food and why members of my family eat one way, members of my ethnic group eat one way, and why I've seen so many health problems among African Americans that ultimately led to this quest to learn more about that history.
So while teaching me in my grade lacrosse, you had the 3-second rule in Chumash. It must have been hard teaching little kids to pass after 3 seconds. And can you tell us how you used your experience from the national team in Syracuse to teach young kids to play at a higher level?
You mentioned the Chumash goal, which is a 6 feet by 6 inches wide lacrosse goal that somebody created and I learned about. And so I introduced it to you all as young players, because at that young age, 3rd, 4th grade, nobody wants to commit to playing goalie, first of all. And I got to have something to keep you guys excited. So I found this, said, wow, this would be really cool. So I remember the first time I took it to practice and did stuff, and I said, man, these guys are just hogging the ball. How do I get them to pass the ball? And I thought about basketball. You know, if you're in the paint for 3 seconds, it's a turnover. I said, let's try the 3-second thing. When I did it, I immediately saw the ball was moving more. I interviewed Larry Quinn, who's a Hall of Famer, goalie, played on the U.S. national team with me, and he said that when lacrosse is played right, the ball should either be in the air, on the ground, or in the goal. And the problem we have now in the sport of lacrosse is the stick technology results in the ball being in people's sticks more than it is in the air, on the ground, or going in the goal. So I tried to come up with a practice plan where you all would learn the game of lacrosse, have fun, and you would move the ball. So that's why I came up with the 3 seconds. It seemed to me that you guys were having a lot of fun, and you were passing the ball like crazy. So what was your reflection?
Today, like, before I get the ball, I know who I'm passing to, so it's helped me today in my game.
Good, I'm glad to hear that. Since I've coached you, I'm now coaching my daughters, so I've coached 5th, 6th, and 7th grade girls, and I do it with them, and it definitely helps. And they love the game. Yeah. I mean, they really love the game, and they pass the ball more. And we get compliments as a team when we play games, and parents from the other team will come and say, wow, or the umpires will say, wow, your team really passes the ball well. So I think people have to come up with a concept to get people to pass the ball.
Do you have a main lesson that you teach on the field and or in the classroom?
One of the lessons I try to say to, particularly with young men, is that, you know, there's so much testosterone going on in your body and you guys want to have fun, but because you don't have your frontal cortex is fully developed, the ability to anticipate what's going to happen when you do X, Y, and Z is not there. And I also try to tell parents as well as coaches that you cannot put so much trust in young folks until their frontal cortex totally develops. It's their unreasonable expectations. So people see some of these pro athletes, when we're, you know, whether it be football or basketball, get into all these problems, whether it be sexual abuse or it be gambling or it be, you know, domestic abuse. They're kids. Until your brain is until you're about 25 to 30, males do not fully develop. So the ability to anticipate and think ahead of time and have long-term planning is just not there. So that's one of the things, is trying to teach people to be responsible. You know, the same thing I teach people on the field, I teach them in the classroom, which is my principles. If you want to go to fredopie.com, look at my website, it's integrity, effort, and care. If you have those three qualities, integrity, that you're a person that can be trusted, care, that you care about yourself, your teammates, your classmates, and effort. If you give your best effort, I think you always know. You guys just ask me, Coach, what's the score? And I would tell you guys, I don't know and I don't care, because I was more concerned with effort. If you guys give your best effort and you lose, who cares? That's great. If you give your best effort and you don't get an A, who cares? That's great. So that's kind of my philosophy and life lessons that I try to share with my kids or somebody else's kids that I'm coaching or teaching.
Moving on to the subject of podcasting and book writing, how did you start podcasting and writing a book?
My first book was published in 2008. The expectation to get tenure as a college professor in the field of social sciences like history is you have to have a book published to get tenure. That's permanent job security. So that was something that needed to be done. Ultimately, it was a lecture I did about food and food history that became my first book, published in 2008, called Hog and Hominy. And then other books came from that. So I'm actually on book number 6, which is pretty ridiculous to think about a guy who has severe ADHD, that I have that much love and passion for my field that I'm able to get past some of these problems. Then the podcast I started 2 years ago, and it had very much to do with producers calling me up about shows. So I knew I wanted to ultimately have greater influence as an intellectual. I figured a TV show would do that, a radio show would do that. And I listened to a ton of talk radio, and then I found podcast about 2 years ago. So as we were trying to work out a show, the first concept was to come up with a food and sports show. Tried to do that for a while, couldn't get anybody to bite and support it. And then we realized the best way to actually get proof of concept would be to come up with our own show. And that's where the podcast came. As the podcasting started 2 years ago, we found that which shows were getting the most influence or most listens to. And it was the shows when I dealt in the area of youth sports, the early recruiting. How do you ask a kid to make a college commitment when you don't even know anything about college? And then the other theme, college affordability. How do you pay for college? How do you get out of school without debt? So those became important themes on the podcast, and that's where we focus now, which is learning and lacrosse education. That's what I try to deal with on my podcast.
And so you've had several guests, such as UNC coach Joe Bresci and Denver coach Bill Tierney. Can you talk about how you, along with several lacrosse icons, are changing the game?
These are people who want to see the game played at the highest quality. These are people that are in the game to use lacrosse as a life lesson, to teach young men, boys, really how to become men. I think that's the theme that I see more than anything else. I saw Coach Tierney after losing in the semifinals this past year, the Final Four. I was down at the stadium doing interviews, and I saw him in the tunnel, and I said, Coach, how you feeling? He said something that just was so profound and speaks of his wisdom. He said, look, it's just a game. We lost the game. I'm not happy about it, but it's just a game. There's a lot more important things in life. And the fact that you can get people in our country who will literally beat up their coach because their kid's not getting enough playing time, playing more, it's just ridiculous. And people need to calm down and have a bigger picture of what sports should be all about. And I think Coach Bresci, Coach Tierney, and people like that, they have a really healthy perspective that I want more people to know about.
Thank you.
All right, cool.
If you like what you hear on the show, share a link on Facebook or Twitter, or send a link to a friend. If you have a question you want us to address on the show, write me at fdopie@gmail.com. You can find our show archive, blog, suggested reading, and more at fredopie.com. That's a wrap for this show. Thanks for listening. To hear more content like it, go to fredopie.com. If you have questions about advertising and sponsoring this show, contact us at fdopie@gmail.com. I will be teaching 5-day, 2-hour each day online course. Don't know what you want to do after you graduate? Take the course. Hate school? Take the course. Feel unfulfilled on your job or in school? Take the course. Don't know how to choose a major? You've been offered a scholarship or admissions, early admissions at a school, and you are clueless about what you're going to major in? Take the course. It's the course that I wish I had taken when I was younger. I share some of the biggest school and career mistakes that people make so that you don't have to make them. We'll teach you how to recognize your gift, identify mentors, understand college career myths, choose the right major, degree, and/or certificate program. We'll help you identify what you need to do and what you need to avoid. Get you financially in shape, and we will teach you how to play, work, live, and give like no one else. Registration online on my website, fredopie.com, fdopie@gmail.com, to ask for additional information